What if I told you that the wealth which built the British Empire, the palaces, the factories, even the railways, wasn't truly British at all? What if it was taken, quietly and systematically, from one of the richest civilizations on Earth? India, before British rule, wasn't a land of poverty. It was a global economic powerhouse, commanding almost a quarter of the world's GDP. So how did it go from being one of the richest nations in the 1700s to one of the poorest by the time the British left in 1947? This is not just a story of war and conquest. It's the story of one of the greatest economic heists in history, a heist so vast that its effects are still being felt today. Setting the stage 0:45 to 2 o'clock in the early 18th century. India was the crown jewel of global trade. Bengal, for instance, was the Silicon Valley of textiles. Its muslin and silk were so fine that European aristocrats paid fortunes for them. The Mughal Empire's treasury overflowed with gold and silver from across the world. But in 1757, everything changed. At a small town called Plassey, the East India Company, a private British corporation with its own army, defeated the Nawab of Bengal. It was a battle that lasted just a few hours, but it marked the beginning of nearly 2 centuries of economic plunder. From that moment, Britain's Industrial Revolution and India's deindustrialization became 2 sides of the same coin. Origins of the drain, 2 o'clock to 3:30 after Plassey. The East India Company didn't just control land, it controlled revenue. The British forced Indian farmers to pay taxes in cash rather than kind, a system designed to funnel money out of India. They extracted raw materials like cotton and indigo at throwaway prices and sold British manufactured goods back to India at enormous profit. Indian weavers, once celebrated artisans, were crushed. British imports flooded Indian markets and local industries collapsed. In some cases, British officers even ordered the thumbs of skilled Indian weavers to be cut off to prevent competition, a grim symbol of economic domination. The rise of the drain system, 3:30 to 5 o'clock, but the plunder evolved. By the 19th century, Britain no longer relied only on trade. It built an entire financial system to extract India's wealth. Taxes collected in India were used not for local development, but to pay British officials' salaries, pensions, and military expenses, all spent outside India. Economists like Dadabhai Naoroji called it the drain of wealth. Between 1765 and 1938, it's estimated that Britain siphoned off the equivalent of $45 trillion from India. Think about that, $45 trillion. Not reinvested, not shared, but drained. Naoroji and other Indian nationalists discovered that even India's trade surpluses didn't benefit Indians. The payments were made in home charges to Britain, covering debts, administrative costs, and interest on loans never used in India itself. The breaking point to 5 o'clock to 6:30. The breaking point came in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. British policies destroyed India's food security. Farmers were forced to grow cash crops like indigo, opium, and cotton instead of food grains. The result? Famine not once but repeatedly. Between 1876 and 1902, more than 25 million Indians died from starvation under British rule, all while India exported record amounts of food to Britain. Trains full of wheat and rice left Indian ports even as millions starved in their villages. The empire called it free trade. In truth, it was a trade of lives for profit. Fallout and failed fixes, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Even as independence movements grew, the economic exploitation continued. The British introduced railways and telegraphs, but not for Indian prosperity. Railways were designed to move raw materials from mines and farms to ports for export. Telegraphs ensured faster military control. Every modern innovation served the same old purpose: efficient extraction. When India finally gained independence in 1947, the economy had been gutted. From 23% of global GDP in 1700, India's share had fallen to just 3%. Life expectancy was barely 32 years. Literacy rates hovered around 12%. The British had left behind not wealth, but dependency, a structure where the colonies remained raw material suppliers, and the empire remained the manufacturer and banker. Modern parallels, 8 o'clock to 9:30, But the story doesn't end there. The patterns of that economic drain, the flow of wealth from poor nations to rich ones, still persist. Today, multinational corporations repatriate billions from developing countries each year. Trade policies, patent laws, and financial systems continue to favor global powers, much like the East India Company once did. Even today, the UK holds over $1 trillion in assets linked historically to colonial trade networks. Meanwhile, India still struggles with issues rooted in that era: rural poverty, agrarian distress, and unequal trade terms. The empire may be gone, but its economic blueprint lives on in a global system that still echoes colonial hierarchies. 3 takeaways: 9:30 to 10:30. First, empire doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears a suit and carries a balance sheet. Second, wealth isn't just created, it's often transferred. And when one nation's prosperity rises unnaturally fast, another's decline may be paying for it. Third, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. The same patterns of extraction that began in colonial India still shape global trade and inequality today. Closing warning plus call to action: 10:30 to 11 o'clock. The story of Britain's drain of India's wealth isn't just a chapter from the past. It's a mirror reflecting the economic power games of the present. As nations compete for resources and corporations control global flows of capital, we must ask, who's gaining and who's paying the price? If you found this story eye-opening, don't let it end here. Share it. Question the narratives you were taught. Remember, understanding history isn't about blame. It's about recognizing patterns before they repeat.